Welcome to Chapter 5. Last week we talked about the self that we create, the one that we think would help us to get along. The unfortunate thing is that we're the only one who lives in that fantasy self. And so what we often do is we create a fantasy relationship. And this week we're going to look at the fantasy relationship that draws us as people who are living in fantasy together and look at how that operates. We're also going to look at boundaries and what happens when we aren't ourselves in relationship, when we have not got real boundaries. And we're going to do an exercise on setting boundaries, what we're willing to do and what we are not willing to do. The exercise of God's free will. God's free will is one of His greatest gifts that He gave us. And so to be able to exercise that will enable you to write your own narrative and not live out the narrative that was handed to you. In our last segment, we talked about how we create a false self that denies all of the things that make us human, that deny who we are as people who are limited and needy and emotional. And we talked about the false self being the place we want to live and how we deny this part. Different ways that we hide from ourselves primarily and then from each other. The unfortunate thing is that the further the false self, the further the imposter, the further the self that we create is from the self that we actually are, the fewer people we can have in our life. You know, the more isolated we become because we can't validate that false self when we're with other people. So what ends up happening is we become very lonely. And we start to look for someone who will validate us, someone who will understand, someone who would get it, you know, somebody who would be with us. We sort of look for this person. This is the soulmate, you know, that is there. And so we go about looking for someone that we can draw into our fantasy with us. And let's say he's walking down the street and he sees this girl. And she looks a lot like this one did, except she doesn't have scoliosis and she does. But she looks a lot like she looks a lot like this girl. And he thinks, my goodness, there she is. This girl is smiling and happy. And this girl is smiling and happy. And this girl tells him what a great guy he is and how she's going to love him and he's going to be everything. And this girl comes along and she meets about 40% of what he is looking for. And what he does is he gives her the other 60. And he starts to relate to this girl's body as if it is this girl in his fantasy. A friend of mine said one time, I've always been monogamous. Have always been faithful to my relationship. I just change bodies periodically. You know, so this is he's trying to believe that she is that person. And it happens very fast. I feel like I've known you forever. I feel like I know you so well. I feel complete when I'm with you. I think I might die without you. Isn't that interesting that we just met last night? I mean, it is so quick and so complete. And of course he knows her. He's already created her along with himself. You know? So this is his created fantasy person. And she's like, what do you mean you love me? I just met you last night. But if she has also got a fantasy, one day I'm going to meet a guy and I'm going to love him so well, he's going to just feel, I'm just going to be so important. And we're going to run off into the sunset. And she sees him, poor guy, nobody's ever loved him like I can love him. Nobody's ever understood him like I can understand him. And he meets about 40%. And she gives him the other 60. And they enter into what is known as a romantic co-illusion. A romantic co-illusion says, I will pretend that I believe that you are who you pretend to be if you agree to pretend that I am who I pretend to be. So it's a mutual, unspoken agreement to avoid the truths that we don't want to see. So, and it works. This is why affairs work. I mean, I can just go over and say, hey, baby, you look so cute. You got a great smile. You know, that's really wonderful. You know, what kind of music do you like?
Christian music.
Christian music. I love Christian music. Do you like the outdoors?
Sure.
Me too. I love to hike and camp and all that stuff. What do you like to eat? Food. I love a man who just likes food. I'm a great cook. I can cook most anything. I can create, you know, a self that fits in with what I think he wants. You can become anybody you want to be for a couple of hours. Affairs have no dirty socks. You know, I mean, it's like so this is the place we try to live, and it works for a minute until we start spending too much time together. And then the human beingness starts to come out. You know, I'm tired of that stuff you play on the radio. You know, I wish I didn't have to plan every single meal. I hate camping. You know? So all of a sudden, you're feeling cheated because the expectation of this relationship is it will meet all of my needs. You will like everything I like. I will get to be just like I am now and have a relationship. The second thing is, when my needs are met, you will just go the heck away and leave me alone. I don't want you telling me when I can play golf. I don't want you telling me when I can come and go or what TV shows to watch. I don't like you controlling my life. You know, and the third thing is you should have no needs of your own. I mean, my needs are the important ones in this house. You know, so unfortunately, no human being can live into that. And so there gets to be some turmoil when both of your human needs and human limitations start to come up. The other place it happens is this is also where Mommy, Daddy, Dickie, Janie, White Pickety Fence lives. You know, these are perfect child, straight A student, polite, early potty trained. I mean, you know, they are going to be the cat's meow kid, you know. So this little kid comes along, and somebody has to come down to earth, you know, to take care of them. And this kid is expected to live into this fantasy as well. So when they turn out to be this little kid who hates school and you know doesn't obey, and then it's like something's wrong here. So this doesn't hold up over time. And it's a family in which the boundaries are all confused because the fight is, you know that marriage ceremony where you have two candles and you light the middle candle and then you blow the other two candles out? You just blew out the whole relationship, you know, because it takes two candles to keep the one candle going, you know. And so that is part of what happens in here. So there's really a real confusion on who's doing what to who and whose truth is true and who's supposed to be what, and everybody's trying to build people into this fantasy so they cannot have anxiety. Because when this fantasy doesn't hold, we get anxious. And then all the stuff we're afraid of starts to happen. You know, we feel like a failure, we feel inadequate, we feel helpless. So a lot of those things go on. So we look at what happens when people are all enmeshed with each other, trying to figure out where you end and I begin. Where everybody is seeing their own fantasy of what needs to be going on as what needs to be happening. We all feel like we're being victimized. You promised. You know, I thought it would be this way. And so now we're like, all feeling like victims. And the children are victims. Children come into this world as total helplessness, being subjected to the wills of bigger people. That's why I think, especially those of us who have been wounded, which is most of us by now, have been wounded, really get up in arms when we see a child being humiliated or abused, or when we see a person being humiliated or abused, because we've all been victimized. There's a huge difference in having been victimized and living as a victim. All of us will be victimized in life. Life will happen. It will do what it does to us. Life is full, as we said yesterday, of pain and suffering. People betray us. People leave. Life doesn't work the way we thought it should. But the biggest difference between a person who is victimized and a person who lives as a victim, the biggest difference between a child and an adult is free will. Choice of response. We don't get to choose what happens to us, but we do get to choose how we respond to what happens to us. So we can choose to grow stronger, closer to Christ, more humble, or we can choose to be an angry, bitter victim. And if we choose to be an angry, bitter victim, we'll just continue to go in that route, and we'll live that way. Some adults choose to stay victims because staying a victim has some perks to it. If I stay a victim, I can get other people to take care of me. I can get other people to come in and provide for me. If I stay a victim, I don't have any responsibilities. I can kill you if I can convince you that I couldn't help it, because a victim is helpless. So if I couldn't help it, then I can get away with whatever I want to. We have a mental health system that victimizes people because it gives us labels that say you don't have to work, you don't have to be responsible, you don't have to heal. There's something innately wrong with you and you can't get out of it. So it puts a glass ceiling on your life, to do that. But victimhood can be very powerful. But the drawback is, if you're a victim, you cannot have a healthy relationship. If you live as a victim, you cannot have a healthy adult relationship. Because a victim can have no power. And all relationships have power of decision making, of action, of creativity, of where we go. So if I'm a victim, I can only have two different kinds of relationship. One is with a persecutor. And a persecutor is somebody who you hold responsible for being a victim. This is, you made me do it. You made me do it, person. This is you are the responsible for my being a victim. Again, if Christian is responsible for me being a victim, I can't change unless Christian changes. But but a persecutor is the one you hold. Interestingly enough, a persecutor is often the very person who loves you the most, who tries to tell you a truth you don't want to hear, who tries to say, I believe in you. You can deal with this. You can overcome this. The only other relationship that a victim can have, a professional victim, is a rescuer. And a rescuer is somebody, listen to this definition, is somebody who agrees with you that you're helpless, who agrees with you that you can't change, who agrees with you that you're less than, and comes in to fix you. The story of setting the boundaries with somebody sometimes is the best thing that can happen, because a rescuer enables. a person to stay in victimhood. And so what you end up with, was a triangle created by Stephen Cartman a long time ago. And it's very powerful because once you get on it, you will play every single role on it. I come in to help you out. I loan you money. We use money because money is a common one. I loan you some money. You waste it on drugs. I get resentful, but I'm afraid you're going to die, and I got to control my anxiety by controlling your behavior. So I'm going to go back and rescue you again, and then you abuse it again, and I get resentful. So it's unending, and it can go on for generations. One of the things that happens many times in families is you have different people playing different parts at the same time. Like, I call my parent and I say, we're not coming in for Thanksgiving. And I'm perceived as a persecutor. Now, after everything I've done for you, you're not even going to come home for Thanksgiving. So I call the other child, but I say, oh, that's okay, y'all enjoy. But then I call the other child, do you know your sister's not even coming home for Thanksgiving? The expectation is, now I'm persecuting, the expectation is you will go and rescue me and victimize the person who's not coming home for Thanksgiving. You see how that works? You go round and round. And people change roles all the time, and it's very dynamic. So it's a very important thing. And another way to think about it is we deny a part of ourselves. Like, I had a really hard time seeing the anger in me because I had witnessed some unhealthy behaviors with my sister being angry, and it didn't work well for her. And so I decided to not get angry. So I would stuff it. So I would go and give everything to something, then I would feel like a victim, and then I would persecute myself because my anger went toward myself. I would become self-destructive. I would go get drinking. I would go get drugged. I would go pick up somebody. I would go do something really stupid and self-destructive because I was feeling like a victim because I'd given so much. And so this to me was a pattern of behavior, because when you can get to here, then you're not responsible for your behavior anymore. And so it goes around and around and around, and it's really hard to get off of. In church, one of the things we'll do is we'll do something like this. Hi, honey, what are you doing? You know what he did to me? I cannot believe how he treats me. Hey, sweetheart, can I get you something? He did it again. He is horrible to me. I just don't know how I even put up with him. Can I get you something? So here I'm going to be seeing myself as loving him, but here I'm going to be persecuting him with my tongue. Sometimes we'll do it this way. I want you to please pray for Christian. He da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I'm so concerned. If I'm concerned about Christian, I need to talk to Christian. If I talk to Brandy about Christian, then I need to say to Christian, I didn't know what to say to you, so I talked to Brandy about this so she knows what's going on. Otherwise, it's called holy gossip. And so this is a very powerful thing. If you start to see it in your life, it's really interesting. And people who want to stay connected, who are in this kind of codependent thing, because all of these are dependent on somebody else. A rescuer needs a victim needs a persecutor. All of them have a dependency on someone else. So if somebody wants to stay in it, you can actually watch them. I love you so much. Please don't, you're the most wonderful thing in the world. I can't believe you're leaving me after everything I've done for you. You are the worst person on earth. And you'll go running round and round it trying to hold on to somebody. And you can sort of watch them go around. Sometimes you almost get dizzy. So there was a person in Kentucky. I was doing a weekend in Kentucky, and this guy was sitting there going, and I'm thinking, what are you thinking? And he was an electrician, and he said, this is an electrical circuit. Once you get on it, you're going to go all the way around it. So what you need here is circuit breakers. And I thought, well, what are the circuit breakers? You know, circuit breaker between rescuer and victim is acceptance. Acceptance is two-pronged. One is, as an adult, somebody said one time, you need to ask people 2 questions before you ever agree to work with them, just 2 questions. I said, oh, what are those 2 questions? They said, number 1 is, you going to kill yourself? Because I'm not going to waste my time. And number 2 is, do you know nobody's coming? Nobody's coming to fix your life. Nobody's coming to make it better for you. Nobody's going to show up. He's already come. And those are hard questions, but they are the questions we have to answer before we do the hard work of change. You know, because it's not going to be different than that. When our childhood needs are unmet, very often we look in our adult life for someone to come and meet our childhood dependency needs. But we wouldn't like it if they did, because when somebody comes and tries to treat you like a child, it doesn't feel right. So it's a double bind in there. That's another one of those double binds. So I need to accept that I am responsible for the story I am writing. I am responsible for the legacy that I leave. So I have to pick up the pen. You know, because time is this paper on which I write my story. You know, time is just the paper on which our story is written. So rescuer has to accept that they cannot control another person's life. You cannot save another person. It's not your job. That job's already been taken. And you can't do that. It's my responsibility to control my anxiety and my grief over someone else's bad choices. It's my job to really recognize my boundaries and act into them, even though it is terrifying. It is terrifying to set the limits. It is terrifying to recognize that, you know, that I'm hurting somebody if they're an adult by taking care of them beyond what they could possibly do. So it is really, really hard. So that's one. Another is forgiveness. The circuit breaker between persecutor and victim is forgiveness. Forgiveness is a very interesting thing, and sometimes I think we think of it as letting somebody off the hook or saying that what you did didn't hurt me. That is not what forgiveness is about. You know, forgiveness is about returning judgment to God. And it is so critical for our health, well-being, and our ability to move beyond our pain. It's the very reason that Jesus came. He came to set us free. And He sets us free by forgiveness. You know, it's a very important kind of thing. In fact, if you claim to be a Christian, it is not a suggestion. It is a command. In the Lord's Prayer, it's the only thing that's bargaining. It's like, you know, give me my bread, hallowed be thy name. And then you get to forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And right below that, in Matthew, it says, if you do not forgive, your Father in heaven will not forgive you. And that is not because Jesus wants to emotionally blackmail us. You know, it's that is the source of our freedom. It's the source of our freedom from our pain. It's the source of our freedom from unhealthy relationships. It's the source of our freedom to live in His peace and to move forward. So forgiveness is huge in terms of, you know, what we do. When my children's father left, I was very angry, you know, and we would get into these screaming matches on the phone. And one day, my next door neighbor walked in. She was a friend of mine, and she said, she took the phone out of my hand and hung it up. And she said, you don't have to live like that anymore. And I was like, oh. That's forgiveness. Forgiveness is hanging up the phone. He can sit over there and yell and scream and do all he wants to. I don't have to live in that. I don't have to live in that negative place. So forgiveness is huge. It's a very important thing. It doesn't mean you weren't hurt. It doesn't mean it wasn't devastating. It doesn't mean that you're not grieving. But it does mean that if you don't want to live in that negative place, you have to forgive. And that is the key. I learned a little bit about unforgiveness with my mother and why we tend to stay unforgiving. So, there was a point at which my mother was unable to love well. She was unable to love me because she was sick. So she loved me, but she was unable to love well or give me what I needed. And I judged her harshly. And a lot of my behavior toward her, a lot of my thoughts about her, but a lot of my behavior toward myself came out of that judgment, even though I didn't even realize it at the time. So fast forward about 40 years, and my mother was dying. And, I remember looking at her and thinking, just feeling, you were a beauty queen at Duke, and you lost 50 years of your life to this disease. How sad. You never got to live in the way that God intended you to. And I felt tremendous compassion and forgiveness. After that, for a little while, I felt tremendous guilt. Because once I forgave her, and I had self-justified my behavior by my judgment of her, once I forgave her, it was like a rubber band popping back on me. My behavior toward her was not good. And so all of a sudden, I felt the guilt of mistreating someone, the guilt of me not loving her well. And it was very painful because I had not planned on that. So one of the big reasons for unforgiveness is that we don't want to feel our own behavior. We self-justify how we treat other people by the way we judge them. And so it becomes a real issue. So that was a lesson. All lessons are not pleasant, but it was a lesson. So forgiveness is huge, and it's something that is the biggest gift we have ever received. And the freedom that we get from forgiveness needs to be recognized. The last circuit breaker is prayer. This is where you put it all. All of the stuff that's painful, all of the stuff that you can't deal with, all of our helplessness over somebody else's behavior, everything goes into prayer. And when we pray, we're surrendering our will to God's will. When we pray, we're saying, Lord, I don't know. This hurts. You know what it's about. And we're trusting Him to do something with the things we can't do something with. And we're beginning to really have the thing. It's interesting because these all are about me. I'm strong. I've been hurt. I'm mad. It's me, 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 me. This is about self. So this triangle will always lead us to self. Either I'll feel really good about myself, I'll feel just self-justified in hurting somebody, or I'll feel like I'm helpless and can't do anything about it. If we live in this triangle, it points us to God. And actually it becomes the Star of David. Me and him and me, and everything's hunky-dory. So, does that make sense to you guys? So we're going to do an exercise to look at how do we then exercise our free will in a way that takes care of ourselves, in the presence of God. I want to just do an exercise to really look at how do we manage ourselves in the midst of the chaos around us. How do we get off the triangle? How do we exercise the biggest gift we have, the gift of free will? That we can manage our time within our God-given boundaries. We can manage our time and our space, where we give it and how much of it we give. So I'm going to do an exercise, and Naisha, I'm going to ask you if you would be willing to come up, if you would be willing to be this exercise. Okay. So what I want you to do is just to identify the different parts of your life that demand your time, where your time goes. So what would be one?
Well, let's begin with God. God is beginning.
So Tom, can you be God?
Sure.
Okay. You remember you're not really God, you're just playing God.
Oh, I
Okay, so who else?
My marriage, my husband.
Husband. Chris?
My girls.
Girls. So kids, the girls. Stephanie?
Yep.
And the boy? Aaron is, where are you? Chris. Other Chris other. And who else?
I would say work, my job.
Work, your job. So, Christian, can you be her job?
My extended family, so my mom.
Mom. Would be Joy. Okay.
Could you help me with the last one?
Well, that's the one that gets all the rest of these things done. Yourself. Herself. I do notice that you put yourself last. So, Brandy? Okay. So, now your job is going to be to come up and really set limits in each of these areas. Communicate boundaries in each of these areas. So I'm going to ask you to come on up, and then the rest of you can come on up, and what I want you to do is make a circle around us. And you are going to become your part. So you're going to become your part, and you're going to walk around, and you are going to tell her what you want from her. And you're going to all do it in unison. When you get to the back, you say it a little bit louder so she can hear your voice. But just walk around, and Naisha, you're just going to close your eyes, and we're going to sit here and see what happens.
Alrighty.
Okay.
Mom, I'm bored.
Make me lunch.
I just need to get some
Wake me up in the
really
morning.
lovely.
Can you make me breakfast?
I don't know what to do.
I need my hair braided.
Some batteries.
I don't feel good. I need you to take my temperature.
Does that feel a little overwhelming?
Yeah,
A little chaotic?
very much so.
a little that way. So what we're going to do is set boundaries with each one of these parts.
Okay.
And you're going to finish 2 sentences, I'm willing to, and I'm not willing to.
Okay.
I'm willing to do this, I'm not willing to do that. And so it just, don't think too deep because this is an exercise, but it's just to show how that works. So
I guess I need God's help.
I guess you need God's help
God, can you help me?
Yes, I will. I'm always here.
in every part of your life. So just go up to each person, and y'all just tell her who you are so she'll remember who you are.
Work.
Work. I am willing to do my job to the best of my ability, but I am not willing to commit and do more than I can.
Self.
Oh. I am willing to take care of you so that you are healthy enough to take care of others. I am not willing to neglect you.
Hi, Mom.
Mom, okay. I am willing to listen to you and to support you, but I'm not willing to take on your burdens as my own. Husband, I am willing to commit to you and to do the things that I promised the Lord that I would do, but I am not willing to take on more than I can.
I'm your baby boy.
Ooh, okay. Love him so much. I am willing to nurture you and to teach you things as you grow up, but I am not willing to give into your tantrums.
I'm your girls.
My girls, I am willing to love you and spend time with you and to teach you new things, but I am not willing to, oh, that's hard. I am not willing to. Jamie, can you help me?
Ask God.
Oh, God, could you help me? Oh, I'm willing to love the girls and to teach them new things and to spend time with them, but I'm not willing to.
Not willing to enable their faults.
I'm not willing to enable your faults.
Which feels stronger? When they're running all around you, or when you are deciding your relationship with each one?
Deciding for sure.
Thank
Feel
you.
more empowered.
Cool. All right. Y'all can sit down. Thank you. This is a really powerful thing to do in your own life when you really break your life down and really look at how am I spending my time? Where can I cut corners? Where do I need to add things? We say we love God, but do we spend time with God? Do we include God in every part of our life? You know, we waste a lot of time on screens, and that's one of the places to really examine. You know, our brains are beginning to change because we never get off of screens. And it's really good to give your brain a rest for at least 2 or 3 hours a day with no screen, you know, to be able to really look at it is my life and how you do the I'm willing to's and I'm not willing to ultimately determines the trajectory of your life and what it's going to be dedicated to in the story you write. So this is an exercise that's in your workbook, and it's really good to go back and do it. So thank you very much.